Good morning, my brothers and sisters. Welcome to episode 70. We're in the book of Acts. And when we last met, we have a group of Gentiles sent from a man named Cornelius to Peter of the apostle fame. And we find them at the mailbox outside the gate screaming for Peter. Now, they've come from 30 miles away or so, and they don't know where Peter is. And so they sort of like meet up in a town that neither has it as their home. And we find that the Gentiles are outside the gates calling out, screaming. Now, why is that? Well, Peter tells us that it's unlawful, or at least in his mind it's unlawful, for a Jew to associate or visit with anyone of another nation. Those are his words down in verse 28 of Acts chapter 10, which we're going to conclude with eventually. So in his mind, it's not lawful for a Jew to associate with a person of another nation. Now, the Lord's trying to change his mind and gave him three visions. And in that vision, the Lord says what to do with his actions, which is arise, kill, and eat the iguanas. And then three times, Peter I think three times he protested and said, no, not now, not ever, I never have and never will. And then three times again, the Lord says what to do with his tongue, which is what God has made clean. Do not call common. Don't call it common with your thoughts. Don't call it common with your tongue. Don't call it common with your action. So when we start the story, let me start in verse 17 today, Acts 10:17. This happens three times, and now Peter was inwardly perplexed as to what the vision that he had seen might mean. So Peter still doesn't know what's going on when the story starts. Behold, the men who were sent by Cornelius, having made inquiry for Simon's house, stood at the gate and called out, so they're screaming from the mailbox, whether Simon, who was called Peter, was lodging there. And while Peter was pondering the vision, so he still hasn't figured it out, now we have this, like the seventh thing the Lord finally says to him. The Spirit said to him, capital F, Spirit said to him, behold, three men are looking for you. Arise and go down and accompany them without hesitation. Now, there's been a lot of hesitation in this Jew-Gentile interaction. For I have sent them. So the Lord says, I'm going to rock your world with these guys. Verse 21, and Peter went down to the men and said, I am the one you are looking for. What is the reason for your coming? And they said, Cornelius, a centurion, an upright and God-fearing man, but not a Jew, who is well spoken of by the Jewish nation, but not a Jew, was directed by a holy angel to send for you to come to his house and to hear what you have to say. And then here's the big moment. This is the big moment of action. Here it is, verse 23. So he invited them in as his guests. So I'm going to say it again. So he invited them in as his guests. Big moment in the history of the church was, hey, you guys, you Romans, you Gentiles, come on in. And the next day he arose and went with them. Well, that means not only come on in for a little visit, come on in for a sleepover. So they slept in the same house. So we find that Cornelius is ready with his family to hear this word, but the person that's not ready to give the word and even be in the same house with them is Peter. Peter's the one sort of with the theological problem. So let's just finish and find out what happens. So he invited them in to be his guests. The next day he arose, and they arose, and went away with them, and some of the brothers from Joppa accompanied him. Acts 11 says there's now 6 guys with him. And on the following day they entered Caesarea, which is where Cornelius, the Gentile, lives. Cornelius was expecting them and had called together his relatives and close friends. When Peter entered, Cornelius met him, and then we get a little confusion here, and fell down at his feet and worshiped him. So Cornelius is now worshiping Peter, but Peter lifted him up, saying, "Stand up, I too am a man." And as he talked with him, he went in. So again, here, so Peter going in to a Gentile's house, associating with them, this is big, and found many persons gathered. And he said to them, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a Jew to associate with or visit anyone of another nation." At least that's their perception. "But God has shown me that I should not call any iguana common or unclean." No, that's not what he says here. Let me quote it exactly. "God has shown me that I should not call any person common or unclean." So actually, the vision was of iguanas. It was of reptiles coming down, and Peter getting his undies in a crumple about the reptiles, and saying, "No, Lord, I've never eaten anything that is common or unclean." And then the voice comes to him 3 times and says, "What God has made clean, do not call unclean." So Peter, we find him at the beginning of the story perplexed and wondering, and at the end of the story understanding that the vision was not primarily about iguanas, though I think it did release iguanas and whatever for diet. The vision wasn't about iguanas. The vision was about Gentiles. Don't call anybody common or unclean. What God is opening up his church and inviting Peter to associate with the blessing of the Gentiles, and inviting the Gentiles to associate with the blessings that are with the Jews and inside the church. So Peter moves to go with them and make no distinction and start to have dealings with them. You remember, even at Jesus' arrest, the Jews wouldn't go into the household of Pilate, so they wouldn't be defiled. And this is the Lord breaking down these barriers with no partiality and no distinctions. All right, so I think the teaching point is for us is to obey the things that God has shown us and embrace the convictions that the Lord has done. We see Peter doing it here with his visions, and we're going to see it later as well. So let's embrace conviction today.